classics. That's always going to be like my jam. But I'm not only going to play retro games. I've got modern games. I've still got. You're going to laugh at me for this. I still have to beat Doom 2016. I never actually beat it. I got most of the way through it and like had a lot of computer problems, especially storage problems. And when you're trying to play a 55 gigabyte install when, when you barely have a working hard drive to begin with, gets a little complicated. For a while I was stuck on a like 250. My main storage drive for a long time was a 250 gig solid state. And it was supposed to be paired with a 2 terabyte traditional, but that died. And then at some point, like I coasted on that for a while. And at some point I bought a bigger solid state as a storage drive, not much bigger, 500 gigabytes. I don't need a lot of drive storage, or at least I didn't. I think I'm going to moving forward, but fuck. So that 500 gig was great, and then I was running on that for a while, and then the 500 gig died, and I RMA'd it. This is such a bullshit story. So the 500 gig died after I owned it for like 2 months, and I replaced it. It was inexpensive. I was kind of asking for it. I replaced it, and then the 240 gig suffered some physical damage from I removed the it had a questionable SATA cable, and I needed to move some stuff around, and I went to unplug it, and even though I squeezed the thing, it pulled the bracket from the SATA header off of the hard drive. Do I still have it over here? I think I still have it on my desk. Do I still, I don't see it. And then I dropped a bunch of shit. Of course I dropped a bunch of shit. I think I still have it. Well, okay. If I have it still, I don't know where it is. But, so the bracket off the SATA header literally broke off. And that sounds like it's, a disaster. But to be perfectly honest, like, it was just the bracket. The pins were still intact. So, it didn't break. So what I did was I unfocused my camera. Camera, please. What are you doing? There we go. Okay. What I did was I cut up a UFS card. I cut up a shitty UFS comment. And I made a little shim to jam into the SATA plug to hold the pins in place. And you know what the best part is? It fucking worked. It worked for a couple more months. So, I was honestly hoping it would continue to work for longer because I felt like it was just the plastic that broke off. The pins were fine. But after a couple of months, the drive just died. Just up and died. And so I installed Windows on my 500 gig. I was like, that's fine. I'll just put Windows on the 500. No, hang on. I'm getting my timeline slightly wrong. So I put Windows on the 500 gig when the drive physically broke. I was like, okay, I should probably just stop using this. So I installed Windows on it, and the very next day, the 500 gig broke again. Yes, the 500 gigabyte solid state drive that broke after 2 months that I got RMA'd, that I got the RMA and I hooked it back up and I used it again. And a month later, I have to install Windows to it. And literally the day after I install Windows to it, it breaks again. So that's when I did the shim thing, right? I did the shim, and I was like, I gotta get this drive working again. There's gotta be a way. Like, by holding the plug in place, I was able to get the computer to boot, but it was only briefly because I couldn't hold it in place long enough. So I set it up with the shim, and I was like, I'm just gonna run off this again. I'm gonna RMA this stupid ass 500 gig again. I exchanged some words with the tech support of the company that made it, because that shit isn't acceptable, right? Like, of all the parts to just break over and over again, storage drives? No! No! So, I got my new 500 gig again. It's still working now, so apparently the first two I got were just bad. This one's working fine. Fingers crossed. I'm still actively using it. It hasn't broken yet. So I guess I was just terribly unlucky. I don't know. It was a bargain drive, so god damn. So I was still running off the shimmed 240 gig for a while, and then just out of the blue, the 240 gig finally just died again. Just died. And nothing I could do got it to read again. So that the drive is shot. The drive was just utterly dead. And I'd already had plans to replace it with a new primary drive. And that kind of pulled my plans forward. Thankfully, I'd already had plans. I'd already earmarked the money. I'd already saved a little bit to be able to buy one. But not as much as I'd wanted. So I ended up having to get a 500 gig again. But this time, I didn't cheap the fuck out, and I got a 500 gig Western Digital? Yes, 500 gig Western Digital M2. So that's what I'm running on now. And I still have the 500 gig external. So I actually have storage. Fingers crossed that it continues to function. Because I'm not holding my breath. But after all those hard drive problems, I was like, I'm just fully expecting the worst at this point. So then I had an additional scare because I have a 500 gig traditional external drive that I had a bunch of stuff backed up to, including all of my music production stuff. My music production stuff was stored on 3 places. It was stored on my 240 gig primary because it's what I fucking worked on. I had it stored on my 500 gig external because duh. And then I also had it stored in a flash drive. And so this is like storage scare number yes. Because then I got my NVMe and I installed onto it. That was a nightmare and a half too, because I couldn't get Windows to recognize it. Or my BIOS. It turned out I needed a BIOS update because my motherboard supports NVMe, but the BIOS that it had didn't support it as a bootable device. So it didn't have the bootstrap necessary to boot from the NVMe. It could only recognize one that was connected to it. So that was kind of defeating the fucking purpose. So god damn, this is a story, isn't it? So my third scare after all of this durdling inside my fucking computer. And I also took the time to thermal paste my CPU because I noticed while I was running on the 500 gig external again, that I was getting occasional overheats while playing Final Fantasy XIV. And oddly enough, it was the only game that was causing it. I could play League of Legends for hours. I could play whatever else. I don't even remember what games I was playing at the time, but I could do anything else for hours. But Final Fantasy XIV, after about 30 minutes, would just hard crash the computer. And I was like, I can't play like this. This doesn't make sense. Why is it doing this? So at the behest of my free company, I downloaded a monitoring software, and I checked it out, and everything seemed fine. Everything seemed fine. I was so confused until finally I played it long enough with the monitoring software up while I was actively playing, and I saw my CPU temp spike up to like 100 degrees. And I was like, oh, no, 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 not good. Not good. Oh gosh, that's bad. So while I was in there, I thermal pasted the heatsink because that was the only thing I could think of. It had been attached for a really long time without being renewed, um, and it didn't overheat when I first got it. So the only thing that could have possibly changed, unless it's case airflow, but I have all new fans in the case too. Oh, that's more bullshit. Whatever. Failed fans are a normal thing. But I had brand new fans, and unless like the case flow was mysteriously like way the fuck worse, the only thing I could think of was the thermal paste, and I'm pretty sure I was right because it's working fine since then. Um, anyway, so storage scare number fuck this shit, right? I get my NVMe set up. I'm good. Everything's great. Windows is running great. I'm installing stuff. The 500 gig is working great for like game installations. And then I hook up my external and it doesn't work. It just doesn't, nothing. Not even a bloop bloop in Windows from it being plugged in. Nothing. And I was just like, uh-oh. And so I grabbed my USB flash drive that I had my backups on, that honestly had been sitting around in, not storage, it's in the apartment, but been sitting around on a shelf for like months. I mean, it was old backup, so I guess it's not that big of a deal. But like the source files for my fucking Doom soundtrack episode 1 were on there and stuff. Like I would have lost all of that. Everything from my music production stuff. And so I got that flash drive and I hooked it up. Bloop bloop. Makes the tone, and Windows doesn't see it. It's not recognized. It failed. So, at this point, I'm just like, great. There goes that entire concept from my life. I mean, not totally, of course, but like with something like music production or something, like losing everything, losing every work in progress, starting from nothing is not a pleasant prospect. I mean, I could have done it. I probably would have done it at some point, but I just like I didn't even re-download my software. I was just like, I'm gonna let this rest. I don't want to think about this. This pile of storage failures is too much for me to handle. And so, um, finally, a week or two later, I'm trying to hook shit up to my computer, and I have 4 front USB ports, right? 4 front USB ports. This is my amateur mistake. My huge, stupid ass amateur mistake. Okay. 4 front USB ports, 2 USB 3s, 2 USB 2s. Okay. And I tried moving some plugs around to make more efficient use of them. And stuff suddenly wasn't working. And I was like, but it worked just now. It didn't like literally break in the time it took me to take this plug out and put it over here. This is hot swappable technology. There's no reason why this should just break. Turned out, when I was putzing around inside my computer, I had disconnected the USB 3 header. So the USB 3 ports were disconnected. The USB 3 ports were entirely disconnected from my computer. So the reason my external hard drive wasn't working at all and didn't even get recognized was because the USB ports weren't connected internally. I didn't think to test the hard drive and other USB ports. I just had, it's a USB 3 interface. So I was like, well, it's gotta be one of these two USB 3 ports. And I just tried those two. And I was like, oh my God. And so I looked up the motherboard schematics to figure out what the fuck I had to reconnect. And I reconnected it, and I plugged in the hard drive, and it went badoop, and I was like, oh my God, thank you. Oh. So, one of my pile of storage failures wasn't. Oh, God. Oh, that was so bad. Ugh. Like, this was all this year, by the way. Except for the first failure of the 500 gig was at the end of last year. All of this stuff was this year. Oh, God damn it.